Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone had a nice lunch. So thank you for coming to this session. My name's David Quilty from the Guild, and I'm pleased to be introducing this session and our speaker. So as you can see on the screen, the title of this business session is "Are your competitors using technology more effectively than you?" So it's very much about the effective use of technology to the benefit of your pharmacy and your patients. And we're pleased today to have the CEO of MedAdvisor, Robert Reid, as our speaker. So Robert probably doesn't need too much introduction for many of you, but I'll just quickly tell you a little bit about him. Robert comes from a diverse commercial background covering strategy consulting, private equity, as well as senior management positions in both medium and large companies. Prior to joining MedAdvisor, Robert was Managing Director of the Australian private equity arm of Herbert Management Corporation, and before this he was the Director of Commercial Strategy and Operations at GSK. Robert was appointed the role of into the position as CEO of MedAdvisor in 2015, and he successfully led the organisation through its public listing on the Australian Stock Exchange in late 2015. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Robert to come up and speak to us. Thanks.
Thanks, David, and welcome everyone to our session today. When we were thinking about our session, we really reflected on the fact that I think most people are aware these days that technology is an imperative part of any business that is run, and often the questions we get asked are really about how do I use it most effectively, and what there's just so much out there, so what do I need to do and focus on and try and distill it down for us. So really what we're going to try and do today is talk about some of the key thematics and a couple of takeaway points that we think will be really helpful for you as you think about how you apply technology into your pharmacy and try and deliver better health outcomes for your customers and therefore better revenue. Just in terms of a quick show of hands, I'm always curious to see who feels that they are using technology in their pharmacy better than their competitors on average. Can I get a show of hands? Who would say they're better than average? So I think I saw 3. Okay, so I'll reveal a couple of stats through the session, and hopefully you can work out where you might sit and where the opportunity might exist for your business. So if I just so just in terms of context setting, I think everyone's aware that there's a lot of rapid change going on in the pharmacy market, and that's clearly one of the key topics that are talked about at events like this and in the media and the pharmacy media. And we're seeing changes all the time. We're seeing it with reducing remuneration from dispensing fees, and obviously competitors being aggressive out there in the marketplace. You've got both big box competitors in the pharmacy space, but you're also dealing with your front of shop competitors who include supermarkets and online. So it becomes quite a broad audience of people that you're competing with as a pharmacy. And in fact, now you're competing with companies like Amazon who have no physical stores in Australia, but they are a competitor to some of your product range that you stock in your pharmacies. We obviously are aware that there's significant change that will occur as we go through the 7 CPA and with some of the changes that the government are keen to put in, like electronic prescribing, and what are the impacts that might have on your business. So the technology change is obviously a constant and something that we need to really react to. I think one of the advantages that pharmacists have in many respects are that they play an absolutely critical role in primary care, and I think this is something that has been completely understated in the commentary that you see in the press. It's a wonderful place for access to basic primary care, and as David and the Guild often advocate, there's patients visit 14 or 15 times a year to their local pharmacists, and pharmacists are ranked as one of the most trusted practitioners or vocations or professionals in Australia. So from a place of access and from a place of trust is a really strong foundation to build a business. On top of that, most pharmacists also identify themselves as healthcare practitioners. So this opportunity to be a convenient access point for healthcare delivery and primary healthcare delivery at MedAdvisor, we think is a really important place for the industry to be focusing on, and for your business to really be thinking about how do you transition to. And the Guild and others will be advocating on many occasions to broaden the scope of practice so that you can deliver more services inside your pharmacy and make more money out of those services and help more patients. But in order to do that, you're going to need to get some fundamentals right. We know that the pharmacy employment market can be challenging, and the pharmacy workflow is very busy. It's often coming at peak times of the day. It's intense. There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that patients don't see, or in some cases don't necessarily value. We hear a lot from pharmacists that they feel underpaid as an employee pharmacist, that I'm not getting enough for what I have to deal with on a daily basis. And so when I'm feeling like that, how do I engage with my customers? And that's certainly something that is a consideration for the industry. And so we believe that there are a number of things that we can, as an industry, help to smooth out some of that demand and help attack some of the challenges that do exist in that context. Because they are the face of your business. Pharmacists are the face of your successful business. If you get that right, and pharmacists engaging really well with your patients, the loyalty that you're going to engender from those customers, I think, will really step up. And what we know is that consumers are looking for you as pharmacists to do that. They're actually wanting you to lead that conversation about health and help with the initial diagnosis and screening and pointing them in the right direction. And what we see through our MedAdvisor cohort is that the pharmacists that are doing that on a consistent basis are not only being able to identify more issues with their patients, but they're selling more. They're delivering more services than the average. And what we see is about a 25% increase in both services and add-on scripts. So how can you use technology to help that? What are the things that you can start to do to lay a base and a foundation for you? What we're going to talk to today is really about leveraging the technology to replace or reduce some of the menial tasks and pressures that you're seeing on a daily basis. I was just mentioning to David before, as we were talking, that there are a number of pharmacies that we know of who have either Guildcare or MedAdvisor who still use paper forms for meds checks. So you just think, how does that happen? The technology sits there, but it's not being used. And how can you make sure that you're getting the efficiencies through the business in order to deliver more services? Because if it's too hard, if there's too much friction in it, it's not going to get done. And I think that's something that is an important takeaway. By leveraging the technology and reducing some of those either those menial tasks or that manual task that you're doing, you're also you're giving yourself time back, and that's time back that you can spend with your patients to focus on health awareness or driving more services. And I think the other part of our conversation today will really be about leveraging data within your business to drive more services style business as well for your customer base. So I think the other point for me to make is that technology that exists today to help has been around in many cases for 8-10 years. So it's not something necessarily that's new. It might be something as simple as an SMS reminder service that's been in the market for circa 10 years. Yet we see some of the best pharmacy groups have on average about 25 times more patients on an SMS reminder service than the national average. So that execution is key. And I think that's probably one of the key takeouts for us, and really trying to make that point clear, is that it's not necessarily just simply about having the platform available to you, it's about how you use it. And there are 3 specific steps that we want to talk about today and go into a little bit more detail. And the first is batch processing. So being able to use and smooth out the workflow that's coming into your business. That you can leverage the data that exists within your dispense system or your business already to provide better and more tailored services to your customers. And that by doing that, those first 2 steps, you'll also have more time to deliver some of these value-added services, or even just relationship improvements with your existing customer base. And that's essentially what we'll talk about. One of the things that, just in terms of data that we can share, is that on average, MedAdvisor pharmacies have about 400 patients on a reminder service, whether that be app or SMS. So that's about the average. So if you've got more than that, you're better than average for those 3 people who put their hand up, and there might be more that have others. And the best pharmacies in our network average about 25% of their total patient pool on a reminder service. But we've seen some up in the 40s and above. Scripts dispensed in the last week were dispensed to people on a reminder service, MedAdvisor, namely, in our case. All right, so empower customers to enable batch script processing. So effectively, what are we talking about here? And this is this routine menial task concept that I've referred to at the front. And probably the best analogy that I could find when thinking about this is the banking sector. And it's not that long ago we all had to queue up in front of a teller to get our passbook stamped and get our balance and do everything manually. And the advent of mobile banking and internet banking changed the demands on those tellers. It actually meant that a lot of that work was no longer necessary. And what did that then create? Created the opportunity to change the way stores and branches were actually laid out in order to offer better service to their customer base. Now, you might think by having less tellers or less banking staff, or in this case, pharmacists and pharmacy staff, that you actually deliver a worse service. And that may not be true. In the banking situation, the online banking customers are the most satisfied customers. Customer satisfaction in aggregate lifted substantially through the changes to mobile and internet banking. And so by leveraging technology to automate some of those and push some of the burden back onto the user, they're able to take away some of the manual processing that was required, and therefore both make customers happier and give them more convenient access to the information they wanted or needed, or the transaction that they needed to have done. And I think there are some analogies, certainly in the pharmacy world, where you think about your floor space, and you've got, roughly 65% of your floor space is dedicated to your front of shop. Now, that's a lot of rent, that's a lot of wage cost, and it's a lot of competition in that area of your business as well. They're the things that tend to be able to be competed with the people I mentioned at the start, your supermarkets, your Amazons, your big box discounters and so on. So by moving through this process of getting more routine tasks automated or streamlining your workflow, you'll be able to consider alternatives for how you use that space in a more effective way. So some of the data that we've seen is quite interesting, to say the least. Glen Guilfoyle, who many of you know of from The Next Level, calculates that for pharmacies that are doing about 300 scripts a day or 100,000 scripts a year, that every week there's about 78 hours where scripts have been taken in by a pharmacist and then are left waiting or not being processed because a pharmacist is on call, as he calls it. that they've made it, someone's interrupted them or they've chosen to do another task. Meanwhile, the customer stays waiting. And his view is that by doing this, you're breaking up the efficiency of the script processing, because you're coming back to it. You're going away and coming back, going away, coming back. And by doing that, you're incurring more time that potentially may not need to be there. He calculates, and we'll show some data on this a little bit later in the presentation, that the average script waits per customer for about 5 minutes. And about half of that time is what he calls white time, or it's time that nothing's happening to that script. So when the average customer walks in with 2 or 3 scripts, that can be a significant amount of time in some cases. So what does this translate to from a customer perspective? Well, clearly frustrated customers, and I think everyone was aware of the Kiss FM DJ who went on a public rant about waiting times at her chemist, and that was the pharmacy industry not representing and thinking about the customer as a valuable part of that process and how much their time is valued. And it's interesting, this shift that we're seeing in customer expectations, and it's not just happening in pharmacy, it's happening in almost every healthcare domain that you look at. And there was a guy called Eric Topol who wrote a book called Doctor, the Patient Will See You Now, which was very much around the democratisation of data, the lifting expectations of patients as to what they expect from their healthcare practitioners. And that shift in narrative is occurring, and it's occurring in the pharmacy world. The expectations of your customers are raising because they're retailers. They engage with retail in lots of different contexts. So they're not necessarily seeing pharmacy as a different category. And so if we can help workflow balance and make sure that orders are coming in at a more organised way, it will allow you to get more time back. So one of the things that, talking about data, you can start thinking about is when is the most busiest times in my pharmacies. Now, you probably know all this anecdotally, but we had a look on Google, and you can do this for your own pharmacy and have a look at both the average waiting times and when people are coming into your store when it's most busy. And there are gaps. There are times where it's really intense, and there are times where it's obviously a lot quieter. And what we're really strongly advocating is that you think about using a tool like MedAdvisor to encourage your customers to order in advance. So don't walk in with 3 or 5 scripts at peak time. Order in advance. And what we've seen from our data is that more than half of scripts are all ordered when the shop is closed. So imagine what that could do for your workflow. The more patience you got on doing that, you could actually come in at this 9 o'clock time, or even before that, before the shop opens, and dispense them all in one go in a batch processing. So you're not having that 2-minute idle per script. You're just going all the way through. And then you get your time back. So I think when you look at the data, for some of the stores that we have in our network, we're seeing more than 30 orders every day coming in, being processed before the shops open, and that's quite a powerful thing we believe. And so the more patients you get on, it becomes a